Hello friends, this is a prologue to the main video. I've recorded the video, I got back to my desk to do the editing and I realised it was about 40 minutes long. So what I've decided to do is split the video into two videos. This first video, I'll go through the four main points of surviving the winter and what you need to do to prepare for that. In the second video, I will go through all the other points with all the tips that you need. Well, this first video is full of tips as well, but everything else you need to think about in preparation for winter and hard times, let's put it like that. So enjoy the first video, and then I'll leave a link to the second video. I'll try and perhaps release both together or very close to each other. And let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, enjoy the video. Welcome back, friends. Welcome back to the homestead. Winter's coming. In fact, winter is nearly here. When I talk about winter, I'm talking about deep winter, not this kind of 0-1, a little bit of snow, a little bit of sleet kind of winter, which maybe you're used to in other parts of the world. Deep winter here means temperatures down to -25 centigrade, or -30. Deep snow, metre deep, 3 feet, blocked roads, trees down possibly on power lines. And for those of you who've just stumbled across this video, or you don't know much about us, we're in North Latvia, 58 degrees north, and it gets pretty cold here, as I've just said. Snow on the ground for about 3 months, two and a half months, 3 months. Last year, today is November the 14th, and we had snow this time last year already. It's arriving maybe at the weekend. So we need to think seriously, which is really the topic about this video, is what to do in winter. How do we prepare for winter? What things should we be preparing for? What eventualities? And how do we do that? So in this video, I'm going to try and take you through my thinking about that process, what we do, what we've learnt, and pass that kind of wisdom and tips onto you. I appreciate that if you're watching this, you might not live deep in the middle of nowhere like we do in a forest, and might not, you might have people around you. But I think there's always something to take from these videos, this kind of video, that you can take and learn and think through. Particularly, probably the last point I talk about. So do stick around to the end to listen to that, because that is a point that affects everyone really. I mean, in some degree, all these points do affect all people, but to different degrees, depending on where you live and what your circumstances are. So these are the four things you need to survive: heat, food, water, and power, energy. That's really what you need. And you need to work out how you're going to get those things to where you live. And what is the worst case scenario that might stop those things happening? And how can you mitigate that in your preparation? So that's what we're going to do in this video. Sorry for the long introduction. Let's get into it now. So the first thing I think is heat. Let's talk about heat. Our property is heated by wood, and so we have to prepare a lot of wood in advance. If you've not prepared your wood by now, it's probably a bit too late, to be honest, but hopefully you're in the rhythm of that and you've got your heating sorted. You've got your heat sorted. If you're on the grid, so we are off-grid with our heating really, because we prepare it all ourselves. If you're on-grid and you've got gas or electric, you need to think about what happens if that goes down. I'll talk about that in a minute, more about the power side. Let's just take a look at our wood setup, as it were. Let's get this thing working. Behind me is our woodshed. Stunis is in Latvian, and you can see the chopped wood here and some bits and pieces around. Well, it's still used as kind of a storage. Plenty of wood there. It's reasonably close to the house, only not very far away at all. So it's not too bad for us to come out of that door there and walk over here, collect the wood every few days and bring it indoors, or maybe once a week. But what we're thinking about this year is if one of us is ill, or the worst should happen, how do we make it easier for us to get the wood in when it is snow and it's freezing temperatures? You don't want to be outside for very long, really, and so the more you can store inside, the better, really. So I'll just take you around the corner. On the terrace, we've got this bench here. It's got some summer stuff on it, really, which needs to come off. But what we can do is stack wood up in here. I can make a little rack mount for this. Stack wood here, which will be right outside the door, for a kind of intermediate place to store the wood. Of course, we do get wood and we put it indoors and we stack it indoors as well. But if we can do one major operation once a month rather than something every week, that will then mitigate a lot of circumstances that could cause problems in the future and allow us to have firewood a lot closer to home. Now, the next question always is, how do you know how much firewood you need? Well, we know that stewiness is about the right amount. But what happens if winter's too long? You have to burn more. It's good to be prepared. So, go down to the barn. Around the barn, it's not very high at the moment, but we have some backup wood here, emergency wood here, and also if we quickly go around the other side, lots of more wood here. Now obviously it's much further away from home because the mainstay of our wood is right next to the home, but if we need it, we can take it from here. We've got a sledge that we can sledge it down to the house. Obviously, before we built the stewiness, before we arrived, all the firewood had to be carted all the way from down where I've just shown you, around the corner there, back to the house there, about 100 metres every few days. It's crazy. So that's something we've mitigated already. Okay, so that's heating, and we've got more we've got bits of wood around that we can chop up in a workshop and stuff if we ever need more. But it's really thinking about those worst case scenarios. What happens if we're ill and we can't get the wood in or whatever? So what's next? Food. Let's talk about food. And let's talk about water briefly, actually. Water comes from our well. Our well is just about there. And the water comes underground, deep underground, into the house there. Never had a problem with the water freezing or anything like that. The only thing that you need to think about is what happens if it goes wrong, what happens if it breaks. Have you got the spare parts here? Have you got the tools that you needed to make the repair? Are you familiar with the pump? Have you made yourself familiar? If you've just arrived and the pump's already here, do you know what it is, what bits you need? Have you taken it to bits yourself? It's a good exercise in summer. A bit late now, but in summer, take the pump to bits and put it back together again so you know it inside out. And if you have to fix it when it's freezing cold, you can do it as quickly as possible when these things freeze very quickly. Even with gloves, and I'll show you the right gloves in a minute. So yeah, that's keeping up the water supply. As a backup, have some bottled water indoors on hand. You can fill the bottles from your own well, or you can buy it from a store or something, and then you've always got some redundancy. A lot of this video is about redundancy, really, with the firewood, having different sources. You've got the water indoors, then if you need it for a few days. If the electric, also, if you're not off grid and you need electric, how are you going to power that motor if the electric goes down? And what are you going to do if you can't pump the water up? Where are you going to get it from? Worst case scenario, I suppose, if we had snow, we could pick up the snow and then melt it on the wood stove. Okay, so that's water. Food. Let's look at food. So, food. We've got food spread around in different places. Now, I'll show you indoors. We'll talk about it in the kitchen, and then we'll come back out again and talk about other areas. So inside in the kitchen, we have quite a lot of redundancy actually for all situations. So we've got our wood fired stove, pleats, as it is in Latvian. We can, that will heat the kitchen, the small room at the back there, our kind of living room, another living room through there if the door's left open. and a back room there. So, you know, in the event of an absolute emergency and we couldn't use the rest of the house, we could actually all sleep and live here, just through a bit of wood powered there. And obviously we can cook on top. There's double rings on top for lots of cooking and keeping things warm and doing the washing up and all that kind of stuff. So wood. We've got a gas oven, uses a completely separate gas bottle supply, LPG, completely isolated. So we can use that. We tend to use that more in summer, obviously, because we've got there's no wood-fired heating, everything there. But separate energy. We've always got 2 or 3 bottles on hand, enough to survive for us to survive a year and a half without having to go anywhere and buy anything. Food storage there, food storage in the larder, nothing unusual there. Usual kitchen setup. Fridge, freezer over there for you know, usual stuff you keep in the kitchen. Nothing particularly different here. The dog's having a drink. Sorry for the noise. Dog's doing what a dog's got to do. Fridge, freezer there, like I say, a few bits and pieces in there. It's where we keep everyday necessities, milk and all that sort of stuff. But that's not our only food storage. So let's go and look at the other types of food storage that we've got. Okay, as well as the kitchen, we're now in the back corridor. That's the door where I talked about the firewood coming in. So we've got this cabinet as well, and this is where we stockpile additional food, which is essentially shelf stable, room temperature stable, long life. So what kind of things have we got in here and do you need to think about? So selection of canned goods, baked beans, sweet corn, a few luxuries, nice big stash of matches, and then with the kind of stuff you want to be thinking about, split peas, barley, gricky, which is buckwheat, pearl barley, flour, more pearl barley, pearl grubus as it's called here, salt. I mean, a lot of this stuff we're buying when it's on offer, but we know it's got a long shelf life, coffee, tea, that kind of stuff, which we've got more in the kitchen. More flour, bread flour. Lots of pasta, different types of pasta, some dried fruit, which can give lots of sweet energy, lots of rice, more pasta, a good selection of honey, which is from our own bees, more flour down there, some sauces, big bag of popcorn, lots of carbohydrates in popcorn. It's a great thing to store. Box not of lamps, but of tea lights, some ketchup, vinegar, and stuff like that. So that's extra storage that we've got, and extra food, lots of energy in there, the carbohydrates, that kind of stuff, that will keep us going if there is ever a long-term problem. Okay, so that's a look in the kitchen. Let's look at the other areas. First of all is the basement. What do we keep in our basement? This basement is actually under the workshop. This basement keeps everything around somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees. And in here we store everything that's preserved and pickled, a few things that we buy from the shop, some sauces and oils, but essentially everything is what we've produced. Some canned peas there, stuff like that we might need. You can see the oil. So we've got sauces, pickles, jams, sauces, preserves, juices, all that kind of stuff. I have made a separate video a couple of years ago about what we keep in here, but it changes year by year. So preserved fruit as well, apple juice, there's about 50 litres there, birch tree juice, and then of course we also keep all our potatoes, carrots, seed potatoes for next year, as well as potatoes from our harvests, and potatoes that have been given to us by neighbours, and potatoes to feed the chickens, all that kind of stuff down here. Loads of food here. Obviously it's further away from the house, so we need to come out and get it, but it's a really nice stash of food. If you really had to, you know, tuck away for a long time, we can talk about how long we could survive, I suppose. You know, you have to think about how long could you survive without a trip to the shops, if that's what you rely on, the shops. A few days, maybe a week, depending on what's on the freezer. Certainly bread, milk, if you need those sort of things. You can live without them, of course, but those are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. We tend to keep long life milk down there in the winter. We'll buy a load, and then we've always got a backup supply of milk if we need it. So in addition to what's in the kitchen in terms of freezer, in the workshop we have this massive freezer, which my friend calls a body-sized freezer, which I think is quite funny. Hello, Anne. In here we keep a lot of our stuff, a lot of our harvest. We keep a lot of some stuff we buy from shops as well if it's on special offer. A lot of it, you know, the majority of it is you know, apples, spinach, raw beans, runner beans, onions, any extra onions, parsnips, herbs, trout that's been given to us by our nephew Hunter, meat. Underneath is still some of our pig. There's some ice cream and some nice stuff in there as well. Stewed apple, other maybe stuff that frozen fruit, strawberries there, all that kind of stuff. Stays in here in this freezer. Obviously, it's a bit dark, isn't it? What I want to say. This workshop stays cold during winter, so this, you know, doesn't need a lot of energy to keep it going actually. When it's -20 in here, except when if I've got the heater on and I'm working in here, which we don't know how often, but the majority of the time it doesn't use any energy because it's cold out here anyway. It stays as it is. So that's a really good investment. If you've got surplus, if you produce a lot of food like we do, you need to be able to store it some over the winter. We can't put everything in jars and cans, so some of it we freeze, and this is where it lives. Okay, so you've kind of now seen all the areas where we store food, and we have got quite a lot of food. You know, if we weren't picky, I'm sure we could survive for months, if I'm honest. You can survive for 3 months on potatoes alone. I mentioned this in another video, so that would be, you know, we could do that, but you just got to live a bit more frugally, shall we say. Right, so that, and then the fourth thing is electric power. What are we going to do about that? Now, we are reliant on the grid here. In the 5 years that we've been here, we've never had a power cut more than a day, but not even a day, a few hours. The reality is, if a tree came down with heavy snow and took down a power line, we'll probably be without power for 48 hours, I guess, something like that. What are we going to do in that situation? Well, for light, we have candles. We have, and obviously we have a big stash of matches, as you've just seen. We know where the candles are. We have torches. We have flashlights, as you call them in America. Each of us has a flashlight. We all know where it is in our bedrooms and in the kitchen and around. Really powerful ones for outdoors, smaller ones for indoors. We've got phones obviously that need charging, so we have power blocks for those, and we haven't got yet, but we are going to get probably one of these battery, the big battery storage, energy storage units, something like the Eco River Flow, one of those kind of things that really can give us a really good boost of power if we need it. If we need to power perhaps the crane, the lift that we use to pick up Gita's my father-in-law, and stuff like that, we can do all those kind of things with that, and we'll survive for a few days with that actually. As we move to more of an off-grid kind of setup here, I will put in a lot of redundancy in terms of batteries, and we'll be able to store a lot of energy, and being with that energy from the grid for a few days will be no problem at all. But in your situation, how would you deal with it? What things have you got lined up? Going back to batteries, we've also got a lot of AA batteries all stored up. charged up. We have a lot of those here in different places around the house, so we always know where they are. And if we need them for small appliances, torches, flashlights, that kind of thing, we've always got them here. So get them, worth getting a whole bunch of those in and charged, ready to go, really. So that's the 4 pinnacles. What other things do we need to think about? Okay, that's the end of the first video on preparing for winter. I hope you found that of some use and interesting. If you did, there's lots of other videos on our channel which are equally interesting, but do stick around for the second video in this series, where I will look at lots of other things that you need to be doing to prepare for winter. Thanks for watching. If you got this far, do give us a thumbs up and do subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I look forward to seeing you in part 2. And if not, another video very soon.